A warm welcome to today's video. I will be predicting the philosophy A-level exams for 2024 for AQA. A few things you need to understand before we get into this. Lots of them are implicit. The first thing, I'm a small channel, and so if you've got requests for things you would like me to talk about before the exams, please leave them in the comments. This video was suggested to me from a comment, and so if you have things you would like me to talk about, please leave a comment and I will be very willing to oblige, within reason. Now, the second thing is that these are obviously predictions. If you were only to revise these things, you're gambling essentially. We can be a bit more certain of the 12s and the 25 mark questions, but we can be less certain for 3s and 5s. I mean, there is a lot of content. They could ask you anything. I remember watching prediction videos when I was preparing for the 2023 exams, and I went in with a certain expectation of what would be on the exams, and I was surprised. And that is true for almost every prediction video. No matter how good the data before is, how strong the prediction is, whether we use AI or the best, longest running philosophy teachers in the country, the exam board are going to surprise us, because that's just always what happens. And so take this with a pinch of salt, and don't base this wholly on your, don't base your revision wholly on this. Just use it as a guideline. Things like the 25 mark questions we can be reasonably certain of. Make sure you're really strong in those areas first. Now, this obviously is what we've had in 2019, 2020, you get the idea. 3s, 5 mark questions, you get the idea of the axes. Now, I'm not going to address anything that's come up previously apart from 2023 and then my predictions. So for the 3 mark question, we had the differences between direct realism and indirect realism. What I think is going to come up for the 3 mark questions, again, 3 mark questions we can't be too certain, is maybe skepticism. Maybe skepticism. For the 5 mark questions, last year we had Locke's primary and secondary qualities and the distinction between them, so another question on the differences. And I think that Descartes is going to come up quite a bit in the paper 1. Now, the reason I think this is, if you look back on previous years, considering what a massive part Descartes has for the spec, he hasn't had loads of attention. He hasn't had lots of questions being asked of him. In the 5 mark questions, in the 12 mark questions especially. So I definitely prepare for Descartes, for the cogito, for his waves of doubt, things like this, because it hasn't come up very much. Another thing is innatism. Now, that did come up in one 5 mark question in 2021. Understand that these 5 mark questions, they're just speculation, so maybe innatism, but Descartes, I would be pretty confident Descartes will come up. I thought going into the 2023 exams, I expected us to have more Descartes than we did. And every year that we don't get lots of Descartes, the probability increases. So Descartes, okay, that's your first sort of prediction that I'm more confident on. So in your notes, Descartes, make sure you're really strong on Descartes. Same again for the 12 mark questions. So 12 mark questions, it might be 5 and 12 you'll get Descartes, but I'm pretty confident it will be one of the two. Now, for the 25 mark questions, in 2023 we got philosophical skepticism. Quite a nice question, at least for me. For 2024, we are quite likely, or I'm not taking them, you are quite likely to get indirect realism. If you look back on the previous years, that hasn't come up yet. I believe that was the question for the spec paper in 16 or 17. So, indirect realism, that's quite likely. The other one that's quite likely is JTB, because again, if we look back, hasn't come up yet. So those two, along with Descartes, revise those for epistemology. Get really strong on those, because they're quite likely. In terms of ethics, 2024 predictions for 3 and 5 mark questions, we can be less certain. Maybe Kant, maybe Aristotle. If we look at the 3 mark question, it might be, I think we can be quite confident it's going to be on utilitarianism. Expect curveballs, of course, take this with a grain of salt. I'm not going to repeat myself, but utility may be a question on defining utility. That will be my prediction. 5 mark questions, I'm not very certain at all. They're my predictions, but again, I'm not sure. 12 mark questions, I'm a bit more certain. I think it will be metaethics. If you look back, we haven't had metaethics yet. It's been asked a lot, but it hasn't been asked for 12 marks yet. So it might be, how does two theories differ? How does emotivism lead to error theory, or something like that? Or maybe how does the Isort gap apply to utilitarianism? So sort of bring in the metaethics stuff. Pretty confident there. And then for the 25 mark questions, here's what we've had previously. In 2024, I expect 2 things. Either utilitarianism, I've got recent videos on those, feel free to use those to revise. And then probably applied ethics. Now this is just based on what we haven't had recently. So we have had virtue ethics last year, and we have had metaethics the year before. So you're not very likely to get those at all. It might be in deontology, again not very likely. So expect applied ethics. If I was to put my money anywhere, it would be on applied ethics, because we haven't had that question at all. Or utilitarianism, because that came up 5 years ago in 2019. So those are my predictions for paper 1. Any questions, please leave them in the comments. Any requests, leave those there as well. I've got lots of videos that should be helpful. Share this with your classmates. Give it a like if it was helpful. Thank you for watching.